Hi everyone, Teresa Jackson here today to give you a tour of Photoshop's new Select and Mask feature, which replaced Refine Edge this past June of 2016. I'm going to show you how to use the tool and share some of my opinions about it. Select and Mask has probably impacted my day-to-day workflow more than any other new Photoshop CC release to date. I'm recording this using version Photoshop CC 2015.5.1. Select and Mask was introduced with Photoshop CC 2015.5. I'm working in the first updated release since its introduction. I mention this because I expect and hope that Select and Mask will continue to evolve and improve. Select and Mask is a bit of a resource hog. I have an older Mac Pro with aftermarket processor and graphics card upgrades. Select and Mask works fairly well for me on this machine, but I can't say the same for my Surface Pro. If your results don't match mine, you may need to upgrade your hardware. Let's get this tour started. I chose this image of a mare in full because frankly it's not going to be that easy to mask. Too many tutorials demonstrate with easy images, but that is not the reality most of us work in. Previous to Select and Mask, I would have started with the Quick Select tool to make a selection of my subject. We can still use this workflow with Select and Mask. I'll paint over my subject using the Quick Select tool, and working with a large brush like this selects it fairly quickly, but we'll notice that it missed the legs of the horse and it selected this grass area in here. So I'm going to zoom in and take my brush size down. Now I'm using a Wacom tablet that's programmed for a quick change of my brush size. Now with a smaller brush I can come in here and try and select the legs, and it's doing a fairly good job, but it's also selecting some areas of the grass that I don't want to select. So I can hold my Option key down, or that would be an Alt on a PC, and then have a subtract brush. So I can come in this area and subtract these areas out that I don't want. Try and pick up the leg and notice it's snapping to the grass, so I need to come back in here. So it's doing a pretty good job, but it's not perfect. It's missing a few spots here and there. And what I would have done previous to Select and Mask is I would have gone this far, where as close as I could get using the Quick Select tool, and then I would have gone into Refine Edge to clean that up. Well, we can do the same thing here, make a selection first, and then go into Select and Mask. And now I'm in the Select and Mask interface, and you can see that it's changed quite a bit from what we had previously with Refine Edge. I'm going to go through all of this, but first I want to go back and show you another way you can start. So I'll cancel out of this. Back in the selection mode view here, we see the marching ants of what I selected. Sometimes, depending on the image, it can be very difficult to see those marching ants, and it's hard to determine what's been selected and what hasn't been selected. Select and Mask does not require an active selection, and that's its #1 attribute over Refine Edge. So right now I have an active selection. We see Select and Mask is up here. I'm going to deselect using a Command D, and that would be a Control D on a PC. I still have the button up here to go to Select and Mask. In fact, I can be on any selection tool. I'll switch to the Marquee here. I still have a Select and Mask button. If I go to the Lasso, I still have a Select and Mask button. So it's completely irrelevant as to which tool you're on, as long as it's a selection tool, and then you can enter the Select and Mask interface. This first tool on the left is the Quick Select tool, exactly the same as the one we used earlier. If I paint across my subject, it snaps out and selects it. Only now I have a really clear view of what I've selected and what I haven't selected. There are multiple ways to view this mask as well. If we go to the right here under Properties, there's the View mode. Currently, I'm in the onion skin view, which is new to Select and Mask. If I click on this little caret, it shows all of the options, and the rest of these are the same ones that were offered with Refine Edge. The onion skin one is new. If you use the F on your keyboard, you can toggle through those. You even have an option to see marching ants. I don't know why you would want to, but it's there. And the overlay, which is probably my favorite way to create a mask because it's so easy to see. And then we have with black background, we have with white background, we have the mask by itself, which is a great view mode for cleaning up and doing the final touches on your mask. And then we have the mask with transparency. So we'll go back to the overlay mode. Right now, the overlay mode is set to 55% opacity, and this allows us to see through to the background of the image. I'm going to scroll down my screen here to the bottom, and I'm going to clear my selection. And then I'm going to go back up to where the opacity is and crank it up to 100%. If you enter select and mask without a selection and you see this, or you see this, or maybe you see this, you might think that there's an error with select and mask. But what's happening is nothing is selected, so you see nothing. You have to lower the opacity to see through to the image behind it, and then as you begin to select it, you'll see the subject come through at 100%. I can now work my way around this image trying to get everything selected. I can zoom into it so I can get this tail here. I might need a little smaller brush to get in there. You have a hand and a zoom tool here in the toolbar, but you don't need them because you have the same keyboard shortcuts in this panel that you have in the main Photoshop interface. So if I want to get in here, I need to get a smaller brush, hold my Option key down to go to the subtract, and then I can subtract that little chunk of the background. And maybe make my brush a little bit bigger and come down and try and capture these legs here. And you'll see that some of this grass got selected. So again, I'll hold my Option key down. That would be an Alt key if you're on a PC. And I'll come through and I'll get this leg. And again, it got the grass, so I'm going to come back in and subtract that. So I'm working my way around this image, trying to make sure that I've selected all of the parts. Now sometimes when you get to a really tiny little something like this, you might have a hard time picking it up. You might have to go back and forth across it. So I'd work my way around the whole image, trying to get as close as possible using the Quick Select tool in the Select and Mask panel. I'm not sure if I can see what's happening here because I'm in the onion skin overlay. So I'm going to use the F key to toggle through. See, this is actually not being selected. I'm going to toggle all the way through to the overlay mode, which gives me a really good view of that. And we'll zoom back out and see how this is looking. Get a little bit more of the mane up in here. All right, pretty happy with how this is working. Nope, I missed one piece here. So let's Option, select that. That cleaned that up pretty well. Now that I've done a pretty good job with my selection, I need to refine the edge of the selection. And Refine Edge is built into Select and Mask. It's the second tool here. So the first one that we've been using is the Quick Select tool, and the second one is the Refine Edge tool. It works essentially the same as Refine Edge did previously. I just paint over an area, and it's going to go along and refine that. You can see it starts picking up the hairs of this tail, doing a much cleaner job of it. And it kind of does it in real time. And the truth is, it's sometimes really, really good and sometimes kind of so-so. Like it's selected part of this tail here that I didn't want it to select. I can hold the Option key down and try and select that back out of there. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Now, I did tell you in the beginning that I picked this image because I knew that it wouldn't be that easy to mask. And some of the areas in here are just too close in tones with the background. And Select or the Refine Edge is having a really hard time determining what's supposed to be the subject and what's supposed to be the background. And that's because of the closeness in tonality and sharpness. Let's see how it works along this foal's tail here. Yeah, it did a pretty good job. Let's see if we can get this corner. It did a okay job, but it also selected a little bit of his leg. If I change my view mode and I go to that view mode that doesn't show the image and just the mask, we have a really good view of how Refine Edge is doing. And in some areas like that, it's just really, really good. And over here, it's not bad, but it's not great either. Here, it seemed to really kind of mess up. Let's see if we can go over that again. And that didn't help it too much. So from here, I'm going to go to the next tool to refine this even further. The third tool down is just a regular old brush, and I love that Select and Mask includes a regular brush. If I'm painting in the plus mode, which I'm set to here, I can add to my mask by just painting that in. If I switch to the minus mode, which I can do with an option, it'll paint in black. I'll do a Command Z to deselect that. So the brush tool is like the last tool that you'll use to come in and clean up these areas that the Quick Select or the Refine Edge didn't do a very good job with. Let's zoom back out and see what other areas we have problems with. We can see here it's not doing a very good job along here. So let's just try and clean that up. If I toggle through my view modes, we can see how the actual mask looks. Let's see what it looks like on transparency right here. So it still needs a little bit of cleanup. Make a smaller brush. I can come in here and try and paint this in. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. I can switch to the minus brush and get a cleaner edge along here. And I would go around this entire image cleaning up these areas like this. And one other tip for the brush, and a little bit of a complaint as well. I absolutely love that Select and Mask has the brush built into it. I wish it had more options to adjust it. We can adjust the size and the hardness and the spacing, but we can't adjust the opacity. And we also don't have blend modes. Those are two things that I think it should have, and I hope get added in the near future. And one other tip here, I use a Wacom tablet, so having my brush set to pen pressure is really key to my workflow. By default, this was set to off, and it wasn't really obvious how to turn the pen pressure on. I kind of discovered that by accident. So if you're using a tablet, you're going to want to go into the brush settings and change the size to pen pressure. Lastly, Select and Mask includes the Lasso tool. I love that the Lasso tool is built into this. If I want to create a cleaner, sharper edge along this leg, for example, I can just use the Lasso tool to draw that edge in, circle back up, and as soon as it connects itself, it refills that area with a cleaner, sharper edge. I only wish that Select and Mask offered a straight edge lasso as well. It seems like an oversight that it's not here. It would be incredibly helpful for masking architectural images or anything with straight edges. So to review the tools in Select and Mask, you have Quick Select first, Refine Edge second, Standard Brush third, and Lasso tool fourth. Then the hand and the zoom for just moving around, which you don't really need because you have keyboard shortcuts. Let's take a look at the right hand side now. I've shown you the different view modes. Let's look at edge detection. Edge detection was also part of Refine Edge. Edge detection can be really helpful, but it can also do some pretty crazy things. I'm going to go ahead and turn on Smart Radius, and this decided to give it a 10 pixel smart radius. It really softened up the mask around the legs here, so I'm not really happy with how that's looking. If you have a subject that's got a lot of fur or hair or something, smart radius edge detection could be really helpful. You could turn this on and then crank the radius down, and that might help a little bit too. My recommendation is to try this edge detection before you start cleaning up with the brush tool. So if it gets you pretty close to where you need to be and there's just some areas that you need to go back in and clean up, you can do that at that point. So I can come in now and paint along this edge and maybe sharpen it up a little bit. And you'll see once you start painting on your mask, it resets that radius back to 0, but it still remembers all the areas that it did go around globally and look for that edge detection. There are more global mask refinements right below here. I'll scroll down so we can see all of them. And the best way to view what these global refinements are doing is to change that view mode again to where you're just looking at the mask. So I'm using my F key, and now I'm on the mask. I have a smoothness set to 3 here. If I crank this way up, you'll see that the mask starts to smooth out even more. If I take it all the way down to 0, we're going to see a lot more kind of hard edge pixels. So a smooth of maybe 1 to 3 is usually pretty helpful on a mask. Sometimes it'll kind of round out these corners like this. That would be the only drawback. But for the most part, it does a pretty nice job of just smoothing out the jaggies. The next one is the feather, and the feather is like blurring the edges. So let's crank this up to over 1. We can see how this really softened this or feathered it. If I crank it up, it feathers it even more. If you feather it too much, you're just going to get a really soft looking mask. So some place between a half a pixel and a pixel is usually pretty good. Now contrast is going to do just that. It's going to take the areas of gray and it's going to make them black, and it's going to take areas of light gray and it's going to make it white. So as I contrast this, it really tightens up the mask. Sometimes this is an effective way to just clean it up at the end. You might need to go back and add a little bit more feather on top of that. Typically though, I keep this at a really low number and I manually go in and I clean up these edges. And the last one is to shift the entire edge in or out. If you're seeing a little bit of a ghosting halo around your mask, you can try shifting that edge in and it'll tighten it up all the way around. Hardly ever go this direction. That'll spread it out from your subject to make it glow, and this will tighten it up. Sometimes a little bit of a shift, a negative shift, is really helpful. I've finished my selection mask and I'm pretty happy with the way it looks. I took the time to zoom in and go around all the edges, and I used a combination of the Refine Edge tool as well as the brush tool to clean up all the edges. If I switch to just the mask view, you can get a pretty good idea of how clean this mask looks now. It doesn't matter what view I'm in when I'm done. I'm going to finish this by outputting it to a layer mask or to a selection. I would pick one of these two options, selection or layer mask. But if I have the layer mask option selected, it cuts a step out for me because it's going to get output directly to a layer mask on the layer that I started on. So I'll just say OK. That returns us to the Photoshop standard workspace, and you can see that the layer has the layer mask on it. If at some point after this I've decided I need to return and do more refinements to this mask, I can get back to select and mask on this mask that I've already started with using the properties panel for the layer mask. So right now the layer mask is selected and the properties panel is offering options for the mask. If I select the pixel part of this layer, I don't have mask options. So I need to switch to the layer mask, and now I have mask options and I have a select and mask button here. If I select this, it's going to return me to the select and mask panel with the mask that I had already created. I could continue to do more edits. Let's zoom in and clean this area around the hoof a little bit better. I can option brush on this to clean that out. And then when I say OK, and it returns me to the layer with the layer mask, we can see that that layer mask was updated with the edit I just made. Overall, I love Select and Mask. It's been a time saver for those masking projects I do almost every day. I hope this tour helps you appreciate it as much as I do. I do hope it continues to improve though. For starters, the brush tool needs all of the features found in the standard Photoshop brush. Pen pressure should be much easier to find and easier to turn on and off. And the lasso tool should also include a straight edge lasso. Eventually, I would love for Select and Mask to provide all the same editing options I can currently use in the Quick Mask mode.